started here. First of all, on behalf of the National Park Service, welcome to Lewis and Clark National Historical Park. My name is John. I'm the park superintendent here. And it's really great having everybody here. It's a very great day, a special day. Not just because it's unseasonably awesome, but it is. And in fact, if you want to get out and I'm going to talk a little bit about friends and people who help us. We've got a new exhibit down by the Historic Canoe Landing, a new panel from the Oregon chapter of the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation. So go look at that. Some people have already done a lot of walking today, right? How far did you guys walk? Yeah. You guys walked from Camp Riley out here along the Fort to Sea Trail, one of our many trails. Very cool. We've got other students here as well. And it's really cool because what we're going to be talking about, we're going to talk about these amazing weapons. What we're talking about is what the national parks do. They preserve these places and these incredible objects and these stories, not just for everybody in this room, but someday you guys are going to have kids who are going to have kids who are going to have kids. And these things that we're going to talk about today are going to be on display forever. How cool is that? One of my favorite little sayings is the National Park Service is in the forever game. And I like that because we preserve these things. So we don't do it alone, and I'll talk about that as well. But I should really start the way that I normally start talks here and say a very important word, Klahowya. Everyone say that. Klahowya. Anybody know what that means? Welcome. Yeah, it's a hello. It's a goodbye. It's a Chinookan word, and it's really an important word. Often I start this because it helps me remember that long before Lewis and Clark were here, the peoples of this river, the lower Chinookan peoples, were here. We're in the midst of the homelands of the Clatsop, and across the river, of course, are the Chinook and Willapa, the Wakayakum and the Kathlamet. Long before Lewis and Clark were here, those folks were here. During Lewis and Clark's time, those folks were here. And all the way to today, those folks are here carrying on their culture. So in that spirit of welcome, Klahowya. Also, I should say, really important things. If something weird happens and the building catches on fire or something, that's an exit. Back the way you came is an exit. In fact, back the way you came is also some restrooms. But if you've attended some of our programs here, we always have that, a little bit of orientation to the building. The other little bit of thing that often, if you've been here before, you probably haven't seen office equipment within this space. And that's actually beyond today's special thing. We're doing some special things in terms of rehabilitating this facility. In fact, including an expansion of our collection storage area so that we can store this stuff more properly. We're doing really exciting stuff like new bathrooms and a new entrance and all kinds of system things, but it's really cool. And this type of stuff doesn't happen without friends. In fact, I'd like to introduce Susan DeShawn. She's the board chair for the Lewis and Clark National Park Association, and Cynthia Thompson is the executive director. They're the folks who support a lot of these amazing programs, and a lot of the great stuff that's happened here wouldn't have happened without them. They're the folks who also run that bookstore. Mm-hmm. And it's an amazing bookstore. In fact, I always love when the Lewis and Clark aficionados come that travel the trail and they get here and they go, well, we haven't been buying a lot because we heard that you have the best bookstore along the trail. And then they buy a lot, which is great because it helps support us, and we're very appreciative of that. Those friends, speaking of friends, you're going to hear from a very special friend of ours, someone who's been a friend for quite a while. In fact, someone else is going to actually do his introduction, but I wanted to recognize that, beyond the talk today, the amazing thing that has happened is that our friend Mike is donating all these period weapons, both shooting arms as well as edged weapons, to you guys. How cool is that, right? What's amazing to me is this collection represents really, I think, the finest collection of Lewis and Clark arms put together in one place along the entire trail. This incredibly generous donation is great because it's not just for the new remodel that will happen eventually in our exhibits, and a lot of these weapons will replace reproductions that are out there now. But it's not just for today or tomorrow, but that forever game that we're in, right? And how cool is that? So we wanted to recognize that in a very humble way. That klahaya often can be pronounced klahayim, which means, oh, I'm low and not worthy. And today we don't really feel worthy of this friendship, but we are very thankful for this friendship with Mike. So Rachel, if you'll come up. Rachel Stokeld is our cultural resource specialist. As you could imagine in the federal government, that if you bring in an amazing collection of guns like this, there's paperwork to be done. And in fact, this is such a rare type of donation to the National Park Service. When we started asking people, like, how do we do this? A lot of people were like, I don't know. So we had to figure out how we could do this. You got to love a bureaucracy, right? And Rachel has done a great job of being a liaison with Mike, but she's done a great job of caring for the artifacts that are on display and those that are held within the park, but also protecting our amazing archaeological sites. So, thank you very much, Rachel.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to turn it over to Rachel to provide just a very humble bit of recognition for our friendship with Mike and how much we appreciate his friendship over those years.
And I will say that Mike was an amazing source of information. Obviously, he has a ton of information on these weapons here, amongst, I'm sure, many others. But so he was very helpful in me generating the information I needed to successfully get the donation processed and bring these objects into our park and then for the U.S. public, as John alluded to. But as a small token of our appreciation, here's our certificate on behalf of the National Park Service. And then a few other items, including this is available in the bookstores. Is it still? The Empires of the
It's for free if you ask
For free.
This is an incredible resource that just kind of.
I don't have to declare it.
No. We'll give it to you. Don't worry about it. Written by Doug Dewar, who's the local ethnohistorian, and he did a great job of kind of compiling the history of all the park units, kind of through prehistory up to today, and kind of the different phases of history that have contributed to what this place is today. So thank you for
Thank
that.
you very much, Rachel.
It looks like we also have some pins, National Park Service and Fort Clatsop for you.
Okay,
So
thank you.
yeah,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
again. This is a great gift, and it really is a huge contribution to our what will be our permanent exhibits one day, and then also just our ability to kind of interpret this time period for people. And people love guns, so we're looking that it's going to be a very popular, very popular exhibit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I will say that, if you've been to one of our historic weapons demonstration programs, one of the things we do very well here, and I'm very proud, it's not just about shooting guns, but it's using those guns to tell this story, this incredible story of challenge and hardship, this incredible story of the teamwork that it took to get here, but also the story of how these people, the Lewis and Clark expedition, interacted with Native peoples across the country. And one of the people who does an amazing job at helping us tell that story and run that historic weapons program is the person who's, I know it's a long-winded introduction, but is the person who's going to actually introduce Mike. Because on staff, I think Sally is probably the person who knows Mike longer than any of us. So I'll turn it over to Sally, and I thank you all for being here, and very thankful for Mike for your generosity.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Just because I've been here a very long time. I was trying to figure out how long Mike and Bev Carrick's friendship has gone back to the park, and it predates me, so it's at least back to the early 80s. I'm not sure if you figured out exactly when, but we just appreciate that long-standing friendship. Every few years, Mike would, well, I'd back up a little bit. You probably figured out that Mike has an interest in firearms, weaponry, and history. And years ago, he decided to combine those two interests and see if he could collect at least one of each kind of weapon used by the men of the Lewis and Clark expedition, which is kind of a daunting challenge. And as John mentioned, he came up with this premier collection that's now yours. Isn't that cool? You don't get to take it home, but you can come and visit it once it's eventually on display. So every once in a while, Mike's come and put on his talk and demonstration, and everybody could see these great things, and our staff and our volunteers could learn about that. Also, everything we know as a staff about Lewis's air rifle, we only know because Mike taught it to us. Now, as you probably know, folks who get really into premier collections like this are sometimes a little bit extreme in some of their activities. I just wanted to finish by mentioning a small example of that. About 20 years ago, our park was looking for a source for replica 1792 contract rifles. Is anybody making these? We think maybe that's what Lewis picked up at the arsenal at Harper's Ferry. We wanted to put some in our historic weapons program. So I sent an email 20 years ago, must have been one of the first emails I ever sent. And I sent it to Mike and asked if he knew an answer. And he did. He put us in touch with the person we got. He answered while he was on safari. And with that, we're going to hand the floor.
And today the answer will be different. I'll talk about that.
All right, very cool.
Thank you, Sally.
So thank you, Mike. Welcome,
Okay.
Mike Carrick.
The very first thing I'm going to talk about is safety, firearm safety. And you want to know if a gun is loaded or unloaded. You never pointed it, well, shoot, and you know the story. But on these kind of guns, you just don't open the chamber, pull a slide back. You've got to see if there's anything down there. So you take your ramrod. It's bouncing off steel, not a lead ball. So there's nothing, and it's all the way down. So there's nothing loaded in this gun. You learn that. And of course, you return the ramrod to the rest where it stays. And then I'll show you how every one of these guns, except the air rifle, is a flintlock rifle. This is a flintlock rifle because there's a little flint in here. And so I'm going to show you how this particular gun works. This is not a gun I donated to the, here's one right here, but I don't want to be fooling around with this gun that's dated 1803. And this is a replica that I've used for hunting, and I've killed an elk with this. So I know Lewis could do it too. It's a 54 caliber gun, 54 caliber round ball, half-inch round ball. But so the guy comes out of the barracks and he's got an empty gun. So you look at it and the flint's good, and when you fire this, the spark goes through a little hole there. So you see that little hole's clean, and you have a little tool that goes like that. It looks like a straightened out hairpin. And you would take your powder horn, and you would have a little measure. You would ahead of time sight it in your gun with the dated Camp de Bois. They had Lewis wrote a lot about sighting in their rifles. And you would find one that works just right for your gun. And it would be like about the size of the amount of powder would be about equivalent to a woman's tube of lipstick. And you'd have a little container, and you'd fill it from here. And you wouldn't ever pour the powder right in here, because what if from a previous shot there was a little spark in there, it'd blow your hand off. So you put it in your little container, and you pour it in there. And then there's powder in there. You would need to put the ball on top, and you would have your pouch, and you would get a little piece of cloth and moisten it, or perhaps it's a little pre-moistened, and you lay it over there because you want a cloth to go around this round ball. And then you would lay the round ball on top of there and push it in, and then carefully push it down, and it would stop right about there. And that's another thing you know. If it goes down to there, you forgot the powder. And oh, that is really a real problem to get the ball out. So it should stop about there. And then, of course, remove this, because if you shoot it downfield, that's the end. You can't load again. So now we've got the ball and the powder in there. And now we have to make it go off. So you pull this is called the hammer. You pull this back halfway, and you push this up, and you have some more powder, and you just dribble a little bit in this little pan here, and there's a hole, and then you cover it with that, pull it back. When you would carry it like that, and then if you're going to shoot something, you pull it back one more time. Watch for sparks.
You can turn off the lights if you want.
No, it's okay. Did you see a few sparks, right? And they go in there and they ignite. They go flash, and the flash goes through that little hole, ignites this powder, and out it goes. And then you do it again. But sometimes, if you've got a little grease in there, it doesn't go off. And that's called a flash in the pan. In today's lexicon still, this is the pan. That's where flash in the pan come from. And this is the lock, and this is the barrel, and this is the stock. When you have the whole thing, you have the lock barrel, the whole lock barrel and stock. Lock, stock, and barrel, that's it. I don't use that often. Okay, every gun up here, except the air gun, works this way, just like I told you. And every deer and bear that they shot, everything they shot, they went through that, even when they're shooting at birds. So then I'll just show you the other guns they carried. We know this is this big long one is a shotgun. And you know, Lewis brought back 177 different birds and animals that were unknown on the East Coast. And the birds were shot with a shotgun. And one of the reasons this barrel is long is you load it the same way, except instead of putting a ball in, you put shot. And then you have to put another wad on top of the shot so it doesn't roll out. So it's a little bit different, but it gives a longer time for combustion of the powder, and you get a little more velocity out of it. You could say the same thing for the smaller guns, but this would be very awkward to carry around in battle. But it works exactly the same way. And this one has a wooden ramrod, which I'm not going to pull out, but I want to show you that it's empty. Unfortunately, this ramrod might have been here for 100 years or more. But this is a fowler. And if you read the journals carefully, you'll never see a mention of a fowler. And I learned it some years later when all the original information was published about Lewis starting up what he needed to do, start the expedition. Then all the information was what he did when he got back. And one of the things he did, they had given several things to Indians as gifts. And Lewis mentioned he wanted to be reimbursed by the government for having given his personal fowler to an Indian chief. So, Lewis had a fowler. He just didn't mention. He just said, well, we shot some ducks, we shot some geese, blah, blah, blah. And so that was the last gun I ever bought for the expedition, because I didn't even know about it till the end.
Mike, is that smooth bore?
Oh yeah, it's just like a shotgun. And here's their musket, and this is what they also shot birds with, because it's a smooth bore, has no rifling. And I told Sally that I would drop the ramrods down there we go. The barrel, just to show you this is not loaded. Nice metallic sound, and disappears. These are just a bigger version of this gun I showed you, and a traditional military musket. All over the world, when they used muskets, this is what they had. They had a fairly long barrel for the combustion, and they had a fairly big. That's much bigger than the 50 caliber ball, and they could shoot a ball. 69 caliber is what they were, .69, and they could shoot a ball, or you could load it with shot, or you could load it with both. Buck and ball, it was called, a ball, and then like 4 buckshot. So it was quite versatile. The men, Lewis originally thought they were going to have 15 men, and he went to Harper's Ferry and had 15 rifles made that I showed you. And then when he realized he need more men, he stopped at various forts and he commandeered men. And those men would have come with their muskets and bayonets. I didn't ask for the bayonet to be brought up, but we have a bayonet for this, and it sits there. They didn't use their bayonets for fighting Indians. Actually, they mentioned them just twice, I think. Once they were gigging some salmon in a stream with their bayonet, and another time they left one at a camp, and Lewis made them go back and get it.
Did someone say that was called smooth barrel?
Smooth bore. The bore inside is smooth rather than have rifling in it.
Oh,
It's just like a pipe, essentially. Whereas this gun has grooves and lands to make the ball spin, which is why you have the patch around it.
Is that very similar to a brown vest?
Yes, that is very similar. The British had muskets just like that. This is dated 1801. So it's 1795 is when the United States made their first musket, and they made them in Springfield, Massachusetts, and they made some in Harper's Ferry. This one was made in Harper's Ferry, made in 1801. So maybe this was on the expedition. 1801 could be. And these two guns, they had one fellow named Drewier, and he was their best hunter by far. And he was a marksman, and he was a gun guy, and he was an interpreter, and he was a very, very, one of the most important persons on the expedition. And we don't know what kind of gun he had, but he had his own gun. And it could have looked like this. This gun was made around 1800. It's sometimes it's called a Kentucky rifle, which is a bit of a misnomer, but that's okay. And this one, dirty, very dirty. Yeah, dang, dang, dang. See this little screw-like thing there? You would put a patch around that corkscrew. And if I were planning on shoot this, I would get it clean to the point where I could put this down very easily. But Drewier had a gun like this, and Captain Clark had a gun like this. Captain Clark's gun, you know, there's not a lot of real fine detail in the journals, because if a carpenter built a house, he doesn't tell you I had a 16-ounce Stanley hammer with, you know, he doesn't go into detail. And they didn't go into detail on their guns. We have to infer a lot of things. But Clark happened to mention the bore on this is very small, about the diameter of a pencil, as compared, and Clark called it his small rifle, meaning very small. And it wasn't very good for the purpose, unless you're shooting squirrels or something. Clark mentioned, you know, shooting an elk, and then they had to track it for miles. But at one point in the middle of the expedition, it wasn't performing very well. The rifling in there, it gradually had worn out, because it was his private gun, and he probably shot it, you know, hundreds and hundreds of times. And they stopped, and their blacksmith gunsmith, a fellow named John Shields, deepened the grooves mechanically with a tool. It's called cutting it out. And that's a spectacular thing to do. I mean, if you lived in town, you had to go to a gunsmith everywhere. But John Shields was smart enough to. Clark happened to mention that it shot better than ever, and it shot 100 balls to the pound. Well, when you work the formula out, that's 36 caliber. That's pretty small, about the diameter of a yellow pencil. So no wonder. However, Clark was out here one day hunting, and he was with some Indians. And when they're walking back from hunting, some ducks were sitting on a pond, and the Indians said, shoot. So Clark took his rifle and he shot the head right off a duck. And the Indians said, oh, big medicine, fantastic, blah, 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 whatever they say. And Clark wrote in the journals, I'm glad they didn't ask me to do it again. Yeah. So you have the Clarks. So you have Clark's and Drewier's guns that were not government issued. And Charbonneau, the husband of Sacagawea and the father of the little boy, Pomp, he didn't say much about his guns, but he got into a gully washer. He was near the river, and then some water came down, and they lost some stuff. And one of the things they lost, Clark wrote, was Charbonneau's elegant fusee. An elegant fusee, well, a fusee was a civilian version of this musket, or an officer's version. And they're a little more slender, they don't weigh as much, and they look a little better. You know, look at the nice wood on this, and it has sling swivels and everything else. But it's essentially, it's a shotgun. It's a smooth bore shotgun, but you could put balls and bullets in it. And so a frontiersman is going to carry something like this because there's going to be time when he wants to shoot buckshot, and there's going to be times when he wants to shoot a ball at a big animal. And this is a typical gun of the era. This gun's from around 1800, we only know because Clark made that one sentence. And my gun shot 100 balls to the pound. And when you use the formula, that's 36 caliber. So Clark would have had, in addition, Clark would have had one of these short rifles. And now, this one I'm going to disparage this collection of the fort. It was thought, President Jefferson told Lewis to go to the Harper's Ferry Armory, which is now in West Virginia, was in Virginia then, and they would make anything he wanted, and it did. He had to make tomahawks, 15, they thought there were only going to be 15 men. So they made 15 tomahawks and 15 big knives and 15 short rifles, they called them. And the question now comes, and Harper's Ferry never made a rifle. The Army never had a rifle before, being short. Compared to, this is what the Army guys were carrying, and this is the rifle for the Army. So, and we figured Lewis had some input in this. And then, when they did decide they were going to offer him to the Army, they sent one to the Secretary of War, Henry Dearborn, in December 1803. And Clark and Lewis were well on their way at that point. So how could they have this guns, one of these guns, when they just got it approved in December? So people said, at Harper's Ferry, they've got about 1,000 other rifles, earlier 1792 rifles, contract rifles, and probably Lewis got one of, they were longer, but probably Lewis got 15 of those, and they would cut the barrel and modified it a little bit. So that's a competing theory. And in the cabinet here, in the museum, they have a 1792 contract. There's lots of seats up here. It's okay to come to the front.
Don't shoot them.
I don't throw out.
Nothing's loaded.
Yeah. So to cover all the bases, the fort here has one of these 1792 rifles. And meanwhile, I wrote an article about this, which I'm going to give to Sally. What happened was, at Harper's Ferry, they made 15 of these rifles for Lewis, and he went off. And then they sent one to Henry Dearborn to say, this is what we paid. And Henry Dearborn, Secretary of War, said, I don't like the looks of the first ferrule. I don't like that. He said, why don't you make it sort of flared out like that? And there was no band here. He says, what if this stock? Put a brass band around here like this. And he made a different sight. And then he sent it back, and then they made these. But Lewis was already gone. So Lewis had the prototypes. Lewis had the ones they made at Harper's Ferry. And not so long ago, well, by now I guess it's several years, one of these showed up, serial number 15. 15, Lewis took 15 guns. And that gun has a straight tube here. And that gun has no brass barrel band here. And that gun has a different sight. And then, upon taking it apart, this piece here, this kind of a three-sided piece, on this gun, it's forged out of one piece of metal. On the one at Lewis, it's the 15, it's not 3 pieces. And on the 3-piece one, the number 15 one, this piece is made in 2 pieces. So, and that was what the gun was sent to Henry Dearborn when he said, okay, change that and we'll make the 1803 rifle. So I think that's exceptionally strong information that Lewis had 15 prototypes, we'll call them prototypes, because serial number 15 had all of the things Henry Dearborn did not like. And then they made this gun and they issued large quantities of them afterwards. So I talked down the 1792 that you got out there, and it's only a replica. Oh, something else. Yes, this is perfect. I was going to say, I don't mind questions while I'm talking, and suddenly Tom raises his hand.
Yeah. That is always interesting. It's always fun to talk about with you. Years ago, when I was at Harper's Ferry, they were, that debate was going back and forth, and they were said, the only thing is they really wondered if there was enough guys working at Harper's Ferry to produce even 15.
Well, Lewis was there for more than a month. Yeah, and they were, and in addition to that, he had 15 extra locks. This whole piece here this whole piece is the lock, which is a very important piece to transfer the pull of the trigger to the shooting. And he had 15 additional locks made. And in the journals, there's mentioned twice that John Shields replaced the locks on there. And they continuously, in the journals, call them the short rifles. These are short rifles compared to these and these. So I would say, and I'm going to continue. I'm going to leave the air gun to last because it's the most interesting. Because they 2 shots if you need them. I think you need them. Some of the other things before I get to the air rifle. Lewis, this is called a spontoon, and it's they were very popular with military up until about 1810 or 1815 or so. I bought this from a deaccession at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., a deaccession auction. And what this is, and Lewis, you'll see a lot of pictures, a lot of drawings of Lewis with one of these. And what he used it for, other than a walking stick, which is the primary thing, but he would always hunt with this. And I don't hunt with a spontoon, but I hunt with a stick. And it's just very easy to hunt, and it holds it just beautifully. And Lewis said he never goes out without his spontoon and short rifle. And there was couple instances, in one instance in particular, we know it saved his life, and in another instance, it frightened a bear. But that little story when Lewis and the group was at Fort Mandan near Bismarck, they were in a big encampment where people wintered over, traders, hunters, Indians, and they told him all about what he's going to find, because they'd all been out there trapping and things. Go up there and you're going to come to the Great Falls of Montana, and blah, blah, blah. So they start up and they're about not too far from Great Falls, and they come to a fork in the river. And Lewis said, "I didn't say anything about a fork. Which way do we go?" It wasn't clear. So they broke the party up, and half of the people took the left fork, and Lewis and the rest of the people took the right fork. And pretty soon, the right fork went like that to Canada, essentially. And Lewis said, this can't be it. So they went back. And as they were going back, they were walking along kind of a clay ridge, 90 or 100 feet above a creek. And Lewis started slipping in the clay of the ridge. And he wrote that he broke his fall with his spontoon. By the way, there's an iron point on the bottom. Broke his fall with his spontoon and got himself back up. That was one. The other interesting thing happened near Great Falls. I actually have seen it's marked there that there's a place there where it's very shallow, the Missouri, it's spread out. And Lewis was out hunting, and it was getting dark. And he said, "Well, I'll just stay out and find the guys tomorrow." And there was some buffalo. So Lewis shot a buffalo calf, and he cut out the tongue, and he was butchering it on the shore. And he said something that I hunt with a flintlock rifle. And I know that's what he did. When you're hunting with a flintlock rifle, the first thing you do is reload it after you shoot it. Well, you don't know what's going to happen, and it's very slow to reload. He says, I made a base mistake. I forgot to reload my rifle, and a grizzly, is coming down at him. So Lewis says, "Oh, pshaw." He said, what am I going to do? So he grabs his spontoon, and he wades out into the water about this deep. And he said he was determined to fight this bear off till the last he could do. Well, the bear got to the shore, and he looked out at Lewis, and he just stood there and looked at him. And as Lewis wrote in his journals, the gentleman declined the fight. And yeah, in another case, when they had encountered, the first time they encountered grizzlies, and they had a big problem with them. I won't go into all the detail, but in the journal that night he wrote, we have had to, they didn't have grizzly bears on the East Coast of the United States. So when Lewis and Clark came across these big bears, they what are those? Well, they're pretty tough. And they got in a shootout with one, and I think they shot him 8 times or something before he fell down. But Lewis wrote in the journals that night, well, we have met the gentleman, and I would prefer to fight 2 Indians anytime. Yeah. So they learned to be careful. And Clark, I'm not 100% sure as Clark had a spontoon. But there's only one instance where it's mentioned. And it's mentioned there's a Pushkin is an area where there's a cliff, and it's situated, if you're on top, the Indians, I think Pushkin is a key word, it's a place where the Indians can stampede the buffalo over the cliff. And then they die, and then they can get them. Because it's very hard to carry a buffalo with an arrow. Well, they came to one of those, and the buffalo they didn't see it happen, but they saw the place was littered with dead buffalo. And they went down there, and there were several wolves who had gorged on the buffalo. And Lewis wrote that Clark killed a wolf with his spontoon. Well, you're not going to kill a normal wolf with a spontoon, but so these must have just been bloated and sated. And he said Clark, actually his words were, Clark killed the wolf with his spontoon, meaning Clark's, I take it. But nowhere else in the journal is it mentioned that Clark has a spontoon. And I'm kind of thinking he didn't, because a spontoon is something that a field infantry officer would have, because if he had a musket and he's leading his men, and Lewis had been one of those, if you had a musket and you're leading your men, you can't be occupied with a musket. It's too cumbersome. You wouldn't have it loaded and everything. So this not only served as a weapon, they had a manual of arms. This meant forward men and hold your place men and retreat. And so Lewis, it was natural for Lewis as an infantry officer to have a spontoon. It was unnatural for Clark as an artillery officer to have a spontoon, but he might have gotten one somewhere. But you'll often see Lewis with the spontoon, and that's just what it is. This is all the stuff I'm donating, so it's not actually guns, but they carried swords like these. They never got home with them, because in the journals they mentioned trading them. They traded a lot with Indians when they needed a horse or they needed something. And I suspect that they didn't get home with them. This would be an artillery officer's saber, and this is an infantry officer's saber by the back part. So they had those. Oops. And at Harper's Ferry, they had tomahawks made. Not just tomahawks, but smoking tomahawks. This is a place where you could put your tobacco, and it comes down through there. It has a little bone here. You sat around and smoked your tomahawk. I didn't have any cannabis. Well, I don't know. So they smoked it, and it's a tomahawk. And this is only the head of one, obviously. But in the journals, Lewis happens to mention that William Clark's tomahawk had a brass bowl, smoking bowl here. And it was very unusual, so unusual that some Indian chief was mentioning it, talking about it, And the chief himself had a very highly decorated tomahawk, and he traded to Clark. The chief wanted this badly, and Clark probably didn't care. And he took the fancy tomahawk. And these are really, I've never seen another, but I know they exist. But I'm kind of thinking they might have dropped this Clark's tomahawk and we found it, but we don't know. But that's why it's here without a haft, because I didn't care. Remember, any questions, you can just raise your hand. Yeah, bathrooms over there. No.
So was there any notable like durability loss with a smoking tomahawk compared to a normal tomahawk? You see like a little hollow middle might make a difference.
Yeah, one would think that, but it's very common, extremely common to have these smoking tomahawks. It's very, very common. And I don't know how many people ever really hit somebody with their tomahawk, as contrasted to sit around every night and smoking it. It's much more useful. And I would think it's very strong because this is a 1/4-inch hole down there. But that has occurred to me too, but I didn't have enough to test them. So I think the most interesting thing that Lewis had, he mentioned, he discussed his air gun. This is an air rifle, like a Red Ryder BB gun, but better. And Lewis mentions it a lot, and it was Lewis's gun. This was not issued, it was not made at Harper's Ferry, it's not government issue. And nobody knows where he got it. I have strong suspicions. When Lewis was having the keelboat built, I'm Irish descent. But anyway, this drunken Irishman was in charge of the building project up near Pittsburgh. And the keelboat was way behind schedule because the river, he had to take it down the Ohio and over to St. Louis. So the waters were receding, and this boat was big, and it had a heavy deep draft. But finally, on August 31st, in the journal it says August 30th, but it's an error. It's August, on the journal, actually Lewis left August 31st, 1803, with the boat with 10 men to help him get it down. And he only went 6 miles, and then he stopped at an island, Bruno's Island, which was an island in the river there in front of Pittsburgh. And he demonstrated the air rifle. And he said goodbye to his friend. He was very active in the Masons while he was stalled up there waiting for the keelboat to be built. And that's all documented. There's all kinds of documents Lewis signed as a Mason while he's there. And he gave a demonstration of the air rifle. And he put a board up and he shot 5 or 6 times at 55 feet it was. I forget it, something like that. And then it says, Lewis writes, one of the men asked to see it, and I handed it to him. And he, not being conversant with how it operates, caused it to go off accidentally. And it hit a woman. And it went, this has a 46 caliber ball, almost a 1/2 inch. And it grazed across her forehead. To the point Lewis had 1/4 of the diameter of the ball. And she fell to the ground with blood gushing. And this is just the first day of the journey. So he runs over there and he says, but she was okay, so we got in the boat and left. The key thing was there were no lawyers in the group. Right? So that was the first days of the air rifle. And I'll show you how this works because it's quite surprising. I mean, you could kill a deer with this. This is not a toy. Well, it's a military rifle. It's a 1780 Austrian military gun. And I'll tell you later how Lewis got it. But you have to have air for an air gun. So you unscrewed this, what we call the canister. And there's a valve in there. This is iron wrapped around and riveted and dropped in molten copper. And there's a valve in there. And if you know anything about a Schrader valve is a valve on your tire. And you know, it's got the little piece and you can go let the air out of your neighbor's tire, that kind of thing, when you're a kid. That's what's in here. I don't know who Schrader is, but Girardoni had this in 17 1790, he invented that valve. And when there's a little rod in there, right? There's a little rod. And when you cock and pull the trigger, that little rod goes boop, and lets a measured quantity of air out. So how did the air get in there? Well, I guess he invented the bicycle pump. Because this kit comes with the gun. And you screw this on there. And there's a little wrench in there to make it tight. And then you take this other tool that he made, but you slip it on here, like that, and it's a ball. When I was a kid, pumping up with those old black pumps, mine was always eventually breaking off where it came to the cross piece. Well, this doesn't break off because he's got it like that. And then you put it like this, and then you pump it. 1,500 strokes. And they're tough ones. They're difficult. You put 800 pounds per square inch. Your tire's got maybe 31 pounds per square inch. You put 800 pounds per square inch in this canister. But it was Captain Lewis, not Private Lewis. I think the privates were pumping this. I mean, so when the military I was in, the captains weren't doing my manual labor. So, and then you just take this off and it goes back in your kit. And in this kit are these two additional canisters, just like the other ones, and they screw them on when they wear out. And then you have your pump, and then you have 4 of these tubes with the balls in them. The balls look like that.
Wow.
They're lead balls, 46 caliber. And let me put the gun back together. So all of the cocking mechanism does is make this little thing go boop and push the valve. This little prong here. So you quickly reload it, only by screwing on the new canister. You open this little tube, and you pour the 20 balls in there. You know, there's something called a speed loader now in modern shooting. These were speed loaders, 1780. Pour that in, and there's 4 of them in here. And then you push this over. There's a hole in that thing. You push it over, and a ball falls right into there. Now it's ready to shoot. You can shoot this 20 balls in a minute, and I have at Camp Rylea. Fort Rylea? Camp Rylea. Camp Rylea. We shot this very one a few years ago, but once it's in the museum, I think there's not going to be any shooting.
We take all the fun out of it.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't ask me to wear white gloves. I really thought you would. So, you shoot it, and then you go like this to cock it, and when you're doing that, you go like that, and the ball comes in, and you cock it. You do it just very, very fast. But Lewis never wrote anything about this. So when all the researchers are trying to figure out what this air rifle is talking about, because it was in the journals because the spring in here broke, and John Shields, the blacksmith on their expedition who fixed Clark's rifle, John Shields repaired this. And when he took, what he did, it had a long spring-like thing, about that long, and he made it out of farriers. A farrier is a horseshoe repair guy. He made it out of a farrier style. And also some of this wood broke, and then they put a new piece on. And leading up to was, we have found the original air rifle that Captain Lewis carried. And when we took the lock off, the spring was made out of a farrier style. When we sent some wood here from this wood, and then the rest of the gun, this was European walnut, this was American walnut, and there was some damage to the sight. And it couldn't, these are very rare, there's only 18 or 20 known in the world. Because the Austrians who made 1,500 of them, they were a failure in battle because you get a little sand in there, by the end of the day, they weren't working. So they destroyed them all. However, the Austrians have been in a couple battles, and they keep meticulous records, and I forget the exact number, but they've lost something like 364 of them in 3 battles. So this is a battlefield pickup, because all of the other ones were destroyed in Austria. And I believe this is all leading to where it came from. When Lewis was in Pittsburgh, he was with this group, and the guy that owned the island was a French citizen, and there was a noted gun collector in that group that they knew about. And so I'm thinking this fellow, Blaise Senas, brought the gun from Europe, and then he gave it or sold it to Lewis or something. And then until, unfortunately, it's not my gun we're talking about, but a friend of mine, when we took his gun apart, is where we saw the Farrier's file and everything. And he donated his gun to the Army Museum at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. Yes.
Is that rifle?
Yes, there are 12 lands and grooves, and it's very accurate. We have targets at which you can be lying on the ground, you can shoot this thing 20 times. There's no smoke, there's relatively no noise, and even though it's not real high power, it's about the equivalent of a .32 auto pistol. And that would wound the soldier probably. But that's good, because when you wound a soldier, 2 other guys have to take him off the field. So it had a lot of advantages. And what happened, like I say, they were a failure in the fact that they kept getting out of order. And when a new emperor came in Austria in about 1810, I think, he called them all in and had them destroyed, of the 1,500. 1,500 guns with 3 canisters each, destroyed them all. So a few, very, very few have survived. Is there any questions?
Was that the last air rifle made
Oh, no.
worldwide or
Well,
for Army use?
up until recently, there was another one. I had loaned them one because I knew eventually I was going to donate this one. But after these were made, around 1800, various gunsmiths in Austria and Germany made copies. Not exact copies, but copies of the system. And I had 2 or 3 of those. I gave one to the National Firearms Museum. And I lent one here, and I picked it up. It doesn't quite look like that, but it's exactly the same system. And they were gentlemen's guns. They were very expensive. And most of the ones, this was a military gun, most of the ones you find that have been copies, they're really nice condition. In fact, one of mine had a big dog engraved here as ornamentation, and it looked like semen. It did, it looked like Lewis's dog. But since the gun had been made in 1810, I guess it wasn't. But I was ready with a story. Are there any questions? This is one of the quietest groups. Thank you, Tom, for your question.
The ramrod with the screw, was that also used to extract balls that you wanted to?
That was like a corkscrew.
Yeah,
That would hold the patch if you had to pull the patch out.
so it's only for that.
Yeah, but there's an attachment that you can, that's screwed in. You can attach, and it's a regular wood screw, like a wood screw. And the idea was to have to jam that in the ball and screw it in and then pull it out. And mostly it pulled the screw out of the lead. What I do, I have to admit, once or twice I've done this, is I turn the gun on its side, and you just carefully put grain by grain by grain of powder in the touch hole. And then you fire it off, and maybe the ball will come out and go bloop. And then the second thing you can do, which I do, I've been hunting in Argentina with my muzzleloaders in Africa and whatnot. I got somebody makes a little kit with CO2 cartridges, and it's got a little tube, an air tube. And you stick that little air tube right in the hole and fire it, and the whole cartridge goes off, and it blows a ball about 20 feet out. One time I was at the airport in PDX, and I was going hunting in Argentina, and all the guns have to be inspected, and the guys come over and tell me, well, you've got some cartridges you can't take. I said, not cartridges? This is a muzzleloader. I don't have any cartridges. Oh, yes, you do. No, I don't. Show me. So the guy comes back, and he's got the 5 air cartridges, the pneumatic air cartridges, the CO2 cartridges that I had for my little tool, and he took them. So fortunately on that trip, I did not forget to put the powder in. Oh, it's just terrible to forget the powder in. Especially if you ram the ball down. It could, it's really hard.
When did percussion caps come in?
About 1823.
23?
Yes, hi.
Hi, I don't remember if you told us, but which one's the oldest one?
I'm sorry?
I don't remember if you told us. It's not really a good question, but which is the oldest one?
Oh, the oldest one, the air rifle. Yeah, the air rifles, depending when it was made, 1790 or something like that. And the other guns were made in the early 1800s. Yeah, I mean, 1790, this guy has these valves and all kinds of things. It was tremendous. And this piece here is just a piece of steel that varies in width almost like a thousandth of an inch from one part to the other. 1790, how'd they do that? I thought they used, yes, Tom?
Let's pretend we're in the antique roadshow
Yes.
and you're the Fraser.
Yes.
What would you, I know priceless, but the air rifle, what?
Well, I've seen the air rifles. The highest one I've seen was $65,000. And the lowest one I've seen.
For Girondoni.
Yeah, Girondoni. And that was after I published this information, and somebody told me, and I didn't have one. They said, Michael, don't publish that information until you find one. But as it worked out, I was buying air rifles. I knew what I wanted, but the auction house I was dealing with, Germany, really didn't know. And so the first one I got was this style, but it wasn't made by Girondoni. The second one I got looked right. It was the one with the dog on it. And
That's the one that we had in here for a while, right?
no, the other one, the first one you had in here for a while.
Oh.
And the other one looked better. It almost looked like this. And that one I donated to the National Firearms Museum in Virginia. And then the third one I got was this one. And they didn't say this is a Girondoni air rifle. They just had a picture of it. And I thought, that's pretty good. If you want to know, I paid $10,000 for it. And that was very good because now they're worth about 50. Not that I'm selling it.
No, you're giving it away.
I didn't get a check. Yeah, so, and the other, I don't know if I should tell you the story. I was down in Uruguay.
That's a good thing that you
I was down in Uruguay, and a friend of mine down there knew that I had this and knew about it. And he said, Mike, there's a collector here in Montevideo that has just the same gun you have. And I thought, well, certainly he has one of these European copies. So anyway, I go to his house to visit. Well, it turned out that he's the richest guy in Uruguay. So he had this room like 4 times as big as this, and there were guns all around the walls, and it was just fantastic. And then I went to see, and he had one of these guns in perfect new condition, but it was missing a ramrod. So when I got home, I called this guy Ernie Cowan in Pennsylvania, who made 4 replicas. And he sold his replicas $20,000 each and would never make another one, he said, because he lost money. Because he made them perfectly handmade. You couldn't tell the difference except he put his own name on them, unfortunately. He knew. So I phoned Ernie and I said, hey, Ernie, I need a ramrod. And he said, oh, yeah, okay, no problem, I can one. He said, it might take some time, though, because the tip of the ramrod's bone. Not bone, horn. And he said, I don't have a piece of horn. And I said, well, let's make it out of plastic. And there was this long silence. And he said, do you want this ramrod or not? So he made it for me. And I took it the next trip to Montevideo. I took it with me and arranged a meeting. And before that, I'd been in Zimbabwe, just when their money had absolutely collapsed. They used American dollars after that, but their Zimbabwe dollars had collapsed. They were worth hardly anything. And I got a $20 million bill, which you could buy a loaf of bread with. But it looked really good. It's just the quality of the bill. It was made in England, so the quality of the bill was perfect. So I had one of those. So I wanted to approach this guy to let him know that I really wanted the gun, but I didn't want to say, will you sell me that gun? It didn't seem right. So the way I approached it was, I said, I'd really like to buy your gun, and I paid $20 million, and I got it with me. And, I don't care how rich you are. $20 million? And he said, well, let me see it. So I pulled out my bill and I give it to him. Zimbabwe, $20 million. He laughs. And then a couple minutes later he says, may I have that? And so, yeah, so I gave away $20. So I gave it to him. And when I left, he was nice enough, he gave me a very nice Bowie knife. But I would have rather had the pristine. Couldn't have been in battle. It was just like brand new. Sure are done. Yes.
Mike, do you think at the, when the expedition departed from Camp Wood River, do you think the men who had been enlisted in the army already, who were carrying muskets, do you think at the start, they started out with paper cartridges?
Yes. Yeah, Lewis got paper cartridges from Harper's Ferry.
Do you think there's much likelihood that they continued to roll paper cartridges?
No, no, I think they use them up because they had lots of gunpowder. And in fact, you know about the lead canisters? Yeah, there's one in there. And Lewis was so clever. For you who haven't seen it, in the little display room in there where the guns are, there's a lead canister cylinder about that big, fork in the top. And Lewis designed those. And there's a ratio of powder to lead. And Lewis built those with 8 and 4. The ratio of those canisters to the amount of powder in it was enough to make balls to shoot that amount of powder. So, yeah, it was a tremendous idea. I tried once. He had a measuring tape, like we have, everybody has. And I looked at some history books, and I couldn't see that there were any measuring tapes, spring-loaded measuring tapes. And I even wrote to 2 or 3, Smithsonian, all kinds of people, and I wouldn't be surprised if Lewis designed that. But I couldn't prove it. Look at measuring tapes, not something. Yes, Ezra?
There was very little way that they could have gained powder over the course of their expedition.
Correct. Absolutely. There were going to be no powder they could get once they...
Right. How much did they start with versus how much did they keep in reserve after?
I think they came home with half what they took out. Does anybody remember that?
They said they could go back out.
Yeah, they said they could go back out again.
Was that you, Mike? Somebody figured that out.
No, yeah.
Yeah, they had enough.
And they ordered special powder for the 1803. They had special grades of powder. They had more coarse powder for the muskets, and they had it's all laid out in the documents.
52 pounds each plus powder that wasn't in the canister.
Yeah, they had, the powder came in those years in a little wooden cask. Okay, Lewis could think, we're going up the Missouri. We have a boat tips over. Our casks go to, Louisiana. So, and as it turned out, they did tip over one time, and the cask fell down, and they dived down, and they got him out with the powder undamaged. But he brought a lot of powder. He didn't bring enough whiskey. They ran out of whiskey, I think, July 4th.
They're using corrosive powder?
No, not the kind of corrosive that you would think of in a rifle cartridge. In a rifle cartridge, when you say it's corrosive powder, it's the primer that has the corrosive stuff. The gunpowder, the black gunpowder, the solvent is water. I clean my gun with water for black powder. I put my patch in water and clean it.
I had a percussion Hawken, and that required a lot of cleaning. Like every time, every time it was fired.
Depends what gun you have. If I'm hunting, I clean it after every shot. Yeah. And if you're shooting, I used to be on a shooting team, and I think I cleaned it after every shot also. But every time I shot it. But ordinarily, I think it can go 4, 5, 6 shots depending on how much. Some powder's dirtier than others.
What kind of finish do these rifles?
They have that brown. Well, I'm not sure if this had an original. I think this had a bright finish time on the barrel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this might have had a bright barrel, but these barrels on these guns were brown, and this one on this air rifle was blued. This is original.
It's a blue.
Yeah. Yes?
What year are the 2 pistols? And it's been a while since I've...
Well, he bought them in May of 1803. May 21st, 1803.
It's been a while since I've read what was found with Lewis. Are those similar to the ones that was found when Lewis?
Died? No. I tried to give that to the fort, they didn't want it.
Yeah, our scope of collections pretty much is what was out here at the time, but
Yeah.
I highly recommend, get a
Two-
hold of
two
our
other
folks,
guns.
not just
Lewis had a cannon on a swivel on the bow of the keel boat, and he had 2 blunderbusses on swivels on the stern of the hill. And I brought these up here, and they said, nah. And the reason, I'm with you, the reason is those guns never got to Fort Clatsop. Near Great Falls, they buried them in a cache, and then they dug them up on the way back.
But the
I'm with
pistols,
you.
the 2 pistols that were found with Lewis.
Well, we know a lot about him because he wrote the receipt. He said, bought in Philadelphia, something like a beautiful pair of pistols by William Booth. William Booth in Philadelphia, 2 pair, and they were $89. And I think I read somewhere captains were making $8 a month, or I don't know. But it was a lot of money.
Well, those were.
Like
those
buying a
were
Ferrari.
found with them.
He had them with him.
Yeah, so those are different than those.
That's something else.
Because I know
No, they're about that big.
on the History Channel, when they wanted to prove murder, they bring out a Charlottesville, like this big horse pistol, and they say, now, here's a pistol of the time period. How could Lewis have killed himself and shot himself twice? And going, well, first, I mean, there's cannons of the time period.
Actually, Lewis, the only thing missing from my collection is those horse pistols. He had a pair of those. But he had a pair of those.
Right.
In the beginning.
Yeah.
And today, one would be $75,000. So I have a replica, but I didn't give it to you guys, but you're welcome to have it if you want. I had a really nice replica. But the William Booth pistols, we know it was William Booth pistols. Well, Lewis had just bought these pistols after the expedition, like 1809 or something, and he put them in his diary, and he talked about them and everything.
That's right. Those weren't the ones that he brought.
No, it had nothing to do with the expedition, except certainly those are the ones that used for suicide. There's 2 of them.
Mhm.
And traveling the Natchez Trace, you would have it loaded. Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you for your generosity. This is
Oh,
amazing.
welcome.
We just happened to be at school that was here. And then we were learning about Lewis and Clark and visiting the interpretive centers. And it was a really exciting opportunity to see someone who's doing something philanthropic. So thank you.
Yeah.
Because we do have to go.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
We have a hike to finish before it gets dark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
For children to see that, like, that's how museums build their collection.
Well, in a few months, all of these will be in the showcase.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And
Thank you.
we'll finish it off in a good Lewis and Clark's fashion. When I say hip hip, you say huzzah. Hip hip!
Huzzah!
Hip hip!
Huzzah!
Hip hip!
Huzzah!
So thank you to Mike.
Is that in the?
And